Hello, everyone, and welcome to Together We Write at Big Bad Online. This is a extremely exciting panel because it's also kind of like a little bit of like, cue that song. It's a family reunion because this panel actually brings together four folks, including myself, Erin Roberts, your moderator, pronoun she, her, who worked on the upcoming D&D book Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, which, if you have not heard of it, it will be out June 21st, and it is an adventure anthology that will you can take your characters all the way from level 1 to 14, and it really focuses around this amazing hub called the Radiant Citadel, which is kind of a landing point where you can go into these adventures, all of which feature new settings and new places and new fun that are based on kind of the cultures of the folks who worked on the book. And it's also sort of notable for being the first D&D book to have all people of color writers of color. So very excited to be here with some of my fellow writers from the project and sort of catch up with how it went and what we're up to now. So if y'all can introduce yourself, let's go in alphabetical order by first name. So Bashir, tell us a little bit about who you are and what did you actually work on for Radiant Citadel?
Hello, I'm Bashir Gauss, he, him. I'm a freelance writer, indie game designer, and cultural consultant in tabletop RPGs. And I wrote for the Beyond the Radiant Citadel section, I wrote the Tayyib Empire, which is like one of the short extra settings you get at the end of the book. Next is Dominique.
Yeah, I'm Dominique Dickey. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a writer, editor, and consultant working in RPGs and fiction. And I wrote the Gold for Fools and Princes, which is an adventure for 7th level characters that is set in an all new setting called the Sunset Empire.
Gosh,
I think I'm going to kick it over to Pam.
Okay. So I'm Pam Punzalan. I am a freelance designer, writer, editor, community management person for RPGC and Asians Represent. And I also do sensitivity reads and cultural consultancy. For Journeys to the Radiant Citadel, I wrote Between Tangled Roots. That is a tier 2 adventure, if I remember correctly. And it is based on a lot of my experiences in the Philippines and post-colonial Philippines, right after the 1800s when the Spanish left, but before the Americans came in. So that's me.
Cool. And I will answer my own question. So I'm Erin Roberts. I am a writer for both stories and games. And I wrote Written in Blood, which is for level 3 characters. And it is based on sort of Black culture in the American South. And it takes place in a place called God's Breath. And actually, Pam, I think you already started to answer the next question I was going to ask, which is sort of all of us had sort of settings that we created. What was the inspiration? And I will warn everyone that, the book's not out yet. We all sort of can't reveal every secret that we put in there, but as best you can, sort of what inspired you? Like, what were you drawing from when you decided to kind of participate in this? What were you excited about?
Honestly, it was the fact that Dayao Longon, which is my setting, is really going to go into how the Philippines has been colonized as a nation 5 times, and that is I wouldn't call it a unique experience, but it's certainly notable, especially based on the conversations I've had with other people about their own colonial background or their country's own colonial backgrounds. And I also wanted to talk a lot, or at least show aesthetically, the home province that my dad's side of the family comes from, because I used to go there almost every year, and that kind of like aesthetic, and my island Luzon, just where the capital is as well. It was a fun opportunity to go into that stuff, because a lot of the design work that I've seen tends to be pre-colonial fantasy. So what if the colonizers never showed up? But and other people tend to go like super modern or cyberpunk or like modern day, but nobody really dwells in that very strange, often difficult space of like, what if you just liberated yourselves? What do you do now? Or like, what if you're fighting the bad guy? How does that go? So I wanted to touch on those things for my adventure and for my setting. I wish I could say more, but wait for the book. I guess Dominic, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to write about like pre-colonial West Africa, a place that like
Oh no.
Uh,
AI
is Dom freezing up
and
for everyone else?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like I was buffering for a second. Okay, I'm back. Um, I wanted to write about an African-inspired setting that didn't have colonial influence and that I was able to show really thriving and prospering.
All right, that's awesome. For the Thayev Empire, I drew a lot. Like my personal obsession is the Gunpowder Empires, which were like the Muslim empires that arose kind of around the rise of gunpowder. And mine draws heavily from the Mughal Empire. And then from before that, a few of the nastier civil wars in India, in northern India, in the time period, and then also in great deal from the American Civil War and westerns to a degree. But that's one that I really cannot explain until the book comes out in a lot of ways.
No, that totally makes sense. For myself, I will say like I was really interested. This not the Civil War, but it's funny to hear you say that. I'm like, I thought I was the only one drawing from America, but I was really interested in trying to figure out sort of Black culture in the South without slavery. Like I was like, because I think a lot of folks sort of think it's very like oppression driven when people think about the South. People are really focusing on like that aspect, and so this is not that. Instead, it's sort of like what's the culture, what's the community, what's farm life like, all that stuff. That's like sort of about the community pulling together and less about sort of what they're fighting against. Other than monsters, because it is Dungeons and Dragons, so there's always plenty. I'm curious, like, how did sort of, so we're all sort of drawing from things that I think are really important to us personally. How did that change the way that you wrote for this project, like versus, something else that everybody here is like written in other ways? How did it change what you're doing, if at all? And I'll start with Dominique.
I think there was
Oh no.
an increase in certain aspects. Oh God, sorry, my video keeps going out. I might go video off and see if that fixes my connectivity issues. For me, there was just an increased sense of personal stakes of wanting these aspects of history that felt important to me to come across. And I also think that that a lot of like setting information and world building and lore and adventures don't really survive contact with players. You tend to like give this as a gift to someone's table, and then what they do with it is what they do with it. So I had to be very explicit for myself about what I was willing to let go of and what was more intrinsic to the setting that I didn't want anyone to space in the society, that there's like a lot of prosperity and wealth, and that it draws from pre-colonial Northern and Western African empires. So I feel like I got a bit derailed by just the awareness that I was buffering. Sorry, I'm not sure if I feel like I answered that in a very roundabout way, but it felt higher stakes for having to determine for myself what I was open to changing and what I wanted, what I really wanted to impact.
Yeah, I think we got most of that. It's just a little bit in and out. It's like surviving contact with the internet as well. But Bashir, how did it work for you?
So they're kind of these twin influences, both the fact that I was drawing on like this period of history that isn't portrayed much and is usually portrayed in a heavily negative light in the West, and also that it was going to be such a visible product. It's a Wizards product. It is going to be as visible as a tabletop product gets. Means that there's kind of that most of my writing is pretty bleak in terms of international politics and stuff, which wasn't an appropriate tone for the Radiant Citadel. And so keeping that in mind, I kind of had to keep in balance that, like, we don't get many options for, here is the good fantasy kingdom, and it's Muslim, and has the same roots in old Muslim societies and old Indian societies as Western ones tend to be based on periods of English or French history. And also, like, a lot of those stories about good kingdoms based on French or English or Western history in general haven't aged super well, or aren't universally there are a lot of uncomfortable elements in them, especially with how they treat monarchy or nobility and the like, and that's something that you have to keep in mind when working on something like this. And it was something that I tried to keep in mind while working on the Tayyip Empire, where I wanted to portray somewhere that was a good place to be and was a heroic place worth saving, or was a place worth saving and worth working for and with, but is still flawed in the way that nation states are flawed.
That makes a lot of sense. Pam?
Oh gosh. So D&D is a huge thing down in the Philippines. I won't hesitate to say that it is the game that 99% of this already small community plays. And you have to go through hours, or if not days, of telling people about other games. Beyond that, no Filipino writer from my country, as in based in the Philippines, has ever worked on something like this before. I am the first that has ever had the honor of being hired by WotC. So knowing that, and also knowing that I, as a designer, D&D is not my strong point. So, and yet writing about my lived experience is something that I've been practicing for a very long time, not just in tabletop, but also in my writing itself. I'd say that it really informed the high stakes, as Dominique mentioned, for their own work, because I wanted to make sure that I could present something that I haven't seen very often in my design spheres yet. But I also wanted to make sure that I stayed as true to what I knew was to be my Philippine experience, because one of the difficult things with any creative work in the Philippines is that you face a lot of pressure to be quote unquote pure. So there are a lot of arguments about, like, can you really say that this is authentically Filipino? You should have like a checklist of 50 different things for it to be authentic. If you miss like one mark, you're a bad person and you're a bad Filipino, right? And that's really hard for me in particular, because I grew up in Canada for the first 10 years of my life, and I did not really feel like I belonged in the country until I was in college. So you can just imagine all of that baggage on top of it, like, hey, you're a product of colonialism, right? So, but also you're hired to do this amazing project, and you're the first one, and you have to talk about the Philippines. So I was like, gosh, where do I even begin? Right? So a lot of it was I did learn a lot, which was cool. So I feel like now I can design D&D because I did the thing and other people were around to help me. So I guess that's that from my end.
Yeah, actually, that's like a perfect segue. And I have to say, I completely relate to that sort of feeling of, the pressure of sort of wanting to sort of capture something that's so important to like who you are. And also sort of what Dominique said, like, once it's out there, and people, that's part of the amazing thing about D&D, but also a little scary. You have no idea what happens to the things that you put on the page once they're out, and we will all have to wait and see. But I'm curious, sort of, we had this very collaborative process, which one of the co-leads, Ajit George, has talked a little bit about in various like Twitter spaces, etc. I am curious, sort of, how was the process of actually working on Radiant Citadel? Does anyone want to talk a little bit about like sort of what that was like compared to sort of other things that you've worked on? And I will see. Bashir, why don't we go to you first?
So there was a lot more like of the writers talking with each other. We'd have video calls I'd make it every like month or so, but they were scheduled more often. of like just getting together, talking through stuff, or just working while on a video call with each other. There was like we had kind of reviewed each other's drafts to give feedback at some points. It was a lot more collaborative than even the more collaborative projects I've been on for other companies, which was really nice. Like generally, I've been on some project where you'll get another writer's draft at some point, or you'll reach out and you'll give another writer a draft at some point. I've also been on like many more where either you don't know what the other writers are doing until you're done, or like you have to reach out to the other writers to get information you need for the section you're working on because someone didn't like connect that beforehand. And so the collaborative process here was a lot more ingrained than it is elsewhere, and I really liked it.
Yeah, definitely. Same. I have to say that, like, before I go to Dominique, hopefully audio is working well, but I have to say it was really great to do. And I think that knowing that we had to, this is going to sound horrible personally, but like, I often am on projects where you should be collaborating more, but like, it's not built into the deadlines. And so I'll be like, oh, I should have gotten that done 6 weeks ago, so I could have reached out to the other writers, but I didn't. So, but here it was like an actual set part of the like official process, which I feel like made me at least lean into the collaboration in a way that like I haven't always done in sort of other projects, because like it was an expectation and not just a like, it'd be nice if you could. It was like, we think that you should, and this is something that, we want you to do. Anyway, Dominique, how's it going over there? How did the collaborative process work for you?
Yeah, I have previously considered myself like a very selfish writer in the sense that I want to like keep all the good and shiny ideas to myself until I can execute them in my own way. And this project, like you said, Aaron, where collaboration was not only encouraged, but it was like built into our deadlines and built into the overall project timeline, really pushed me out of that comfort zone. And I think I learned really important lessons about how to work with writers that would not have come up in other contexts. I also came to really enjoy that I never felt siloed, where I've worked on projects with other companies where it was like you go off and you do your own thing and then you come back and hand in your deliverable. And this was like, even when we were all writing our own settings or our own adventures, there was a good amount of back and forth, whether it was those, co-working video calls that we'd arranged, or just people, sending messages back and forth about their progress or asking for advice. And it was a really scary undertaking, as I've mentioned before, just knowing that there was all this pressure on of wanting to represent this setting accurately. And I never felt like I was alone in that, even if I was the only person that was directly writing my parts of the book. I never felt like I was alone with that pressure, with that fear.
Pam?
So I was one of the writers that was on the other side of the world. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to join a lot of the calls, which kind of super sucked, mind you. But it was enough to be together with all of you and seeing everybody post their stuff and talk about their things, and just like knowing that you could reach out at any point and speak to each other about what was up was already like a huge deal for me, because most of the projects that I've done or match the experiences that all of you have had on your own collaborations, you don't really like engage on every single step, and you generally know that you could reach out. But again, it's like, as Aaron put it, it's not like bolted into the process with very set guidelines and the constant reassurance that like, hey, everybody's here for you. If you have any problems, you can talk to the following people. If you just want to hang out, you can do this. If you need suggestions, you can do that. So I love the fact that there was a lot of guidance. And I think that a lot of designers and writers or anybody doing creative stuff would benefit from that a lot if more project managers took the time to make clear guidelines. I think that we'd all be much better for it. So
yeah, I also have to say that like it was nice to see other writers kind of go for it. Like I think because there's a little bit of like, it's a big undertaking. Like when we read each other's work, like I got a little, not actually angry, but like I read a couple things. I was like, I should have thought of that. That was brilliant. Like this is such a great idea. Like, I can't steal it now, but like looking at, and also like looking at touchstones, looking at things that like somebody else did and saying like, oh, is there a way I can do something similar in my setting, and sort of seeing ways that things like where there were, even though we were all writing separately, things that like kind of pinged off of each other, I thought was really inspiring, and really for me helped me kind of, when I was revising, try to like push things to the next level and really like, try to like really make it work, and not be afraid, I guess, and actually kind of like, go for it all the way. I'm curious for you all, what sort of opportunities, like not like job opportunities, but opportunities were there sort of within this project that, you haven't seen any of other places that we haven't talked about yet. Pam?
The opportunity to get a very good sense of how to design for a system from step by step and every aspect of it, with the style guides, with even giving some like suggestions on what kind of visuals you'd like to see. That's hard to come by. And I will say with full honesty that I took a lot of that learning and have started trying to put that into my own design, whether I'm like one stop shop, I'm the only person doing it, to me being like the head of a team or me being a part of another team. It really helped me grow as a designer, and it was a great boost of confidence, honestly. So I'm I'm optimistic that my experiences here will speak for themselves in the design when people read my adventure. And it's also a nice little thing, at least personally, to add on my end, because since 2019, a lot of opportunities have come my way. And I know that a lot of that is because of the communities that have responded in kind to me when I said, like, hey, I'm here from Manila. I want to do design work. And a lot of people were like, really cool. Here's like 20 different projects every year, right? And I'm like, cool, I'm dying, but this is great, right? And I'm hoping that Journeys to the Radiant Citadel will be yet another door open, and that um, if I'm sure that there are going to be better designers from the Philippines than me in the future, and I do hope that like if they were impressed by what I did, then maybe they should consider a lot of my peers as well, or like take me back, because I'd love to, whether it's any other system. So I guess it's like a roundabout way of answering the question.
That's all good.
So I'm in a similar boat where I think by far the biggest opportunity was to see like the organizational stuff, the templating stuff. I have shamelessly been kind of using with like the way we did art orders for Radiant Citadel. I've not directly ripped off the template or anything, but I've been using that approach to like send stuff out for artists on the game I'm currently working on, which has been pretty valuable so far. And the way that like they templated the templating that was given to writers, the way that the project was organized pretty well with milestones and expectations, etc. All of that was by far the biggest, like an enormous thing just from a project management side of just, oh, this is what I should look like as a professional outfit, even as a one-man job. And then let's see, the biggest challenge was meeting the expectations of all of that. I think I was most of the other writers on Radiant Citadel were more experienced than I was at the time. I think I was relatively new for someone on this project, and there was like definitely the sense of I need to try and nail this, when that was definitely the biggest challenge of just getting things to the level where I felt I was contributing to the degree I should be.
That makes sense. Dominique?
Yeah, I'd say that one of the biggest doors that it opened is that there is no like class on how to write for IP. Like no one teaches you how to do it. You totally have to learn by doing it. And once you have that skill set, like Pam and Bashir was saying, with like learning how to play in a sandbox, how to use those style guides and templates, how to do art orders in a certain format, which I do. I have learned a lot from how to do the art orders with my own like projects as well. I also definitely learned a lot about like project management from the top down just by seeing how efficiently that project was managed. It was a very tight ship, and I admire that, and I want to do that in my own like endeavors. I think the biggest challenge that came with working on it for me was like learning. I know I've already spoken to it a bit, but learning like how to really lean into those collaborative aspects. So all of this help and all of these resources were available to me, and I was definitely one of them, like one of the greener writers on the project, learning how to kind of put my own insecurities aside and ask for help when I needed help, and reach out to other writers when I it's an opportunity to collaborate more directly or to bounce ideas off of each other. It felt like the way the project was managed came with this built-in community. And I, as someone who I've mentioned, I'm selfish with my ideas, but I'm also kind of selfish with my struggles. Like it's really hard for me to let people see when I'm floundering, and especially because I felt so new in this industry and in this space and had this really massive undertaking that came with a lot of pressure, learning how to collaborate not just on the highs but also on the lows, learning how to not just win in front of peers but also kind of fail in front of my peers, and letting people really see like my messy drafts or moments where I just had no idea what I was doing. I think that was something that I really gained from working on Radiant Citadel, but it was also really difficult to step into that.
Yeah. Wow. It's so funny to hear people talk about struggling, because I'm like, I think there's always the perception that like everyone else is doing amazingly, and like you know what I mean? You're like, what? You're rock stars and I'm just here. Do you know what I mean? It's so funny to hear like almost everyone be like, I was the person who didn't know what they were doing. I'm like, it can't be possible for like
For all of us to not.
almost third of the project. So I think
Someone had to have been the adult in the room.
exactly. Maybe we do more than we thought, you know what I mean? But I also like think that there is that like really being willing to kind of, yeah, exactly, like show your work. I also found like, and this is something, I write prose as well, and I feel like I learn a lot by looking at and giving feedback to other people's work, because like it helps put you in like that feedback brain, and then when I go back to my own work, I'm able to be more I don't know, just like more discerning, and also just like cheat off of other people's work. To be honest, like I definitely opened up like all of y'all's stuff, like and was like, how did they? Wait a second, this person seems to have figured out how to get things from point A to point B, or like, oh, that's how they kind of made this, like how they got this part to be really succinct, and then was like, I will steal it, not exactly, but I will steal part of it. And so for me, that was like a big opportunity, was to like see things in process, because like a lot of times the examples that you get are like the finished version, and while that's what you want it to be, I think it's also really nice to see things like in process, to be like, oh, here's how other people figured it out, like, here's some cool things that I could do as well. So that's really great. I'm kind of curious, this is like a little bit of the same question, but um is there anything, sort of, what is like the main thing you're going to take with you like to your next project after that? I know you've talked about the art order process, which I don't know how much you can reveal of that without like specifically, without I don't know, wizards showing up in this stream to the lawyers dragging us off on the sidelines. But is there anything that you haven't mentioned that you're going to definitely like sort of bring with you along the way? Whoever.
I think I mentioned everything.
You did. It's all there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm definitely. So some of you already know that I'm working on the Dagger Isle supplement, and that's for Blades in the Dark, and I'm the project lead, I guess, because I pitched a concept and Evil Hat was like, "Cool, you do the thing," and I'm like, do I know how to do the thing? So I think that the biggest thing, as I kind of mentioned already, was the structuring of documents that you give to other designers. I learned so much from that. So that is definitely one thing that I'm now applying to everything that I do. And I think if I could emulate the kind of collaborative work that I saw in our spaces in other projects in the future, I will absolutely try to do that. Even if it means that I'm going to be there basically 24/7, because I think that's super cool. You're not just like making a project with designers, you are forming small communities, and hopefully you're also making more friends, because that's always nice, having more people that you have a warm connection with, even if it was just on one project. That always opens some doors somewhere. So
Yeah, I would
Dominique,
say
any
from like
thoughts? Go
a
ahead.
yeah, art orders were really challenging, and I learned a lot about how to do them just by doing them. Because and I keep going back to them because I don't think very visually. Like I'm not a very visual person. So there were kind of two hurdles to it for me, which the first is like, how do I take this concept that exists very nebulously in my head and assign a clear visual to it? And then also, secondarily, how do I translate that visual back to words and references so that I can hand those words and references off to an artist to realize this visual that is still very hazy for me. And I'm continuing to learn more every time I have to do them for other projects. But that was my first time really formally doing art orders, and that was like a really an uphill learning experience. From like a project management perspective, like Pam was saying, I definitely want to create more collaborative spaces going forward. I want to build when I'm working on my own projects, I want to build teams that feel like they can work together and go to each other in the same way that we all kind of lean on each other working on this project. And I'm still kind of figuring out like on the project management side what the like secret sauce is that makes that happen. But that's something that I'm definitely like striving towards, and I didn't even know that I wanted until working on this project.
We've got some actually this is sort of a question on this line from the chat, which is we've been asked, Pam, if you can elaborate a little more on like sort of what it was about the structure that you thought worked really well for the project, you know, within the bounds of, you know, what we can all say on the internet.
okay, definitely speaking as a independent designer, the beautiful documentation. The more you can document exactly what the members of your team need to do, right from word count all the way down to aesthetics to tone, to also giving suggestions on sections and even providing them little copy, kind of like, okay, for this section we want you to start with this sentence and you can add blank plus this. That's so helpful, because a lot of the commissions that I got prior to this one had a, we love your work, please write us 2,000 words. Here's the book. Read it, figure it out. And I'm like, cool. I'll try my best, right? But at least if you have like full documentation with a lot of goalposts and guidance, and you have like a set of expectations and do's and don'ts, that will really, really make projects flourish. And you will also be, in a way, contributing to mentoring other designers on how they can do things a certain way. I'm not going to say it's the way, because there's no such thing as that when it comes to any creative work, but it'll show you one method, and that method can be very instructional in the sense that you'll either totally go for it, or you'll take certain parts out and move them around and do your own thing, or you will say, I absolutely don't want to do it this way, I'm going to do it another way, and you're going to be inspired to create something else. So that's kind of what I meant by like what made this particular structure work.
Yeah, I'll say, to build on that a little bit, one of the things that we got was sort of a lot of examples, like specific examples, because there's like a lot, especially for something like for Wizards. There's a lot that has been like, if you want to see like, here's an example of like a read aloud, like there's probably hundreds, thousands. One of the things that I really like was that they kind of picked a few that they were like, these are really good examples that we think work really well. And something I've asked in other projects now is like to ask people, you know, I'll be like, oh great, I'll read the whole book, like it's fine, but if there's something that you're like, man, I always think about X, you know, part of an adventure, I loved this particular NPC, like I thought it was really well written, has been a really great question for me to ask for people who are giving me work, because it's nice to know what is resonating with them so that I can look and see, okay, well, what is the sort of the secret sauce that they think is like the sauciest, I guess. that I can then draw from when I am trying to kind of make my own dish work. This is a horrible food metaphor, but you get what I'm saying. Another question that we've got from the sort of group as a whole.
Metaphor.
What? Tonique, sorry.
I said that was a wonderful metaphor.
Oh, thank you, Dominique. So lovely. It's like a voice from the heavens saying that I'm doing all right. One of the questions we've got is sort of what we learned from sort of each other as collaborators. Like, is there anything that you can think of and sort of tools and techniques that you learned from some of the other folks on the project during it? We learned nothing.
I took quite a bit of writing NPCs from how Justice did on the drafts during draft review.
Yeah.
Definitely going forward, like I read up on like Justice's NPCs in the draft for his location, which obviously I cannot talk about in the slightest. I can give no details. I was like, oh, this is better than how I have been approaching this. And I've been using at least some elements of that since. I'm not sure how visible it will be in anything we put out because we write pretty different sorts of characters, but yeah.
I feel like I learned a lot about structuring a adventure that'll give you like choices and a roadmap from Mario's adventure. That was some good stuff going down there because I don't know anything about adventure writing. I have a very vague idea of how to do things, but I'm really more like a setting lore person. And if you gave me a book as a GM, I could figure it out. But if you told me like design an adventure, I'm like, maybe you should have hired another person, but okay, I'll try. Right. So I learned a lot from that. And I think I also learned a lot from writing stuff in a system that encourages conflict, but writing stuff where you don't actually have to do a lot of combat, if at all, from Serena's adventure. That was also really, really nice how things played out there. So I think those are like the two big takeaways. But honestly, like I'm gonna be everybody's fan. Like Aaron, I read everyone's work as the moment I had access to it, and I was like, wow, what am I doing here? Right. So I'd say that the sheer inspiration that you get from reading other people's stuff is already like amazing, and wish that you had more time to pick each other's brains about that.
Dominique, anything?
Yeah. So I'll say like, not even naming names, so I don't remember whose was whose, and I don't want to get any wires crossed. But in terms of learning techniques, it was fascinating to see people approach the same template in different orders. So when people would check in and say, oh, I have these sections left to do, it was always fascinating to see who was going through the template from top to bottom versus who was like, I'll do NPCs first, then history and government, then whatever else. Because we had these like this very like rigorous templates, very, very solid, like as Pam was saying, very solid internal documentation where it was like, we're given these documents and we're told what our target word count is, how that should be broken down ideally, what kinds of information we should include, and then just kind of set loose on it. And seeing people approach it from different directions really helped when I felt stuck, because I was able to see like, oh, well, like I don't have to go through this template like from top to bottom. I don't remember who it was that did this, so I don't want to say the wrong person, but like, oh, I can just take a step back and do all the NPCs first. I can do all the NPCs, then circle back and do everything else. Or like designing the adventure, I can do the finale first and then circle back and figure out how to build toward that moment. And that felt really like, those were the kind of techniques that I was most likely to steal, was just seeing people approach the same content or the same guidelines from different angles.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think for me, this one is one, it's like, it's just only so much I can say without having the book open. But I think like occasionally I would make a choice that I think is like of a way to approach either the setting or the adventure that I thought was maybe not the more typical choice that I would associate. And and then I would see somebody else make a similar choice, and I think it made me feel like, okay, like I'm not just like rebel without a cause, destroying this project from the inside. Like some of the ideas that I'm having are ideas that other people are having, which I think was just like a confidence boost that like was, so just looking and seeing from them, like, and then a lot of times they would take that idea that I had and like do it more or do it in a way that I was like, oh, that's what I was trying to get at with this choice. Now let me see how they've done it like even more. And I think adventure structure, Pam, I'm also like a lore first person. So looking to see the adventures and saying like, okay, like we can do this.
I can write a novel. I can write a short story. Adventure. What?
So much, so much. We only have about 10 minutes left. So let's take one. I'm going to take this one more question, and then we'll wrap up by saying what we're kind of up to next. But one of the things, actually, before we get to this audience question is, I know Ajit has talked about sort of part of the point of this project, in addition to just being awesome, is to kind of give more people a seat at the table. Pam, you talked a little bit about this and the people that come after. So I'm curious sort of how you think this kind of influences either your kind of personal career path or what you see for kind of like diversity, people of color writing within tabletop.
Well, for me, it really is a great opportunity because let's face it, whether regardless of what your feelings are about Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, it is one of the bigger franchises out there for tabletop, and it will have eyes on you. And I intend to be. I mean, for one, I'm going to migrate very soon to Toronto permanently because there's no real tabletop industry in the Philippines. It doesn't really exist. But abroad, that means I might be able to get a job. And how do you get a job? You have to have a good resume. So just speaking very, very bluntly, this helps me a lot beyond giving me the opportunity to speak from lived experiences and history, right? On a level of diversity, I don't think that it should be understated how important it is that this project exists because it shows to primarily white spaces that there are people out there who do care, who are listening, regardless of who they work for and where they're from, and they want to see more of this. So it's a great confidence booster, and it's also something that it leaves me very hopeful. And again, as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure that there will be better designers than me out there in the future. I hope, though, that I've measured up to enough standards such that when somebody reads my adventure, they say, this girl came from the Philippines. There's got to be other talent out there that we're missing. And I want that to be a first step. Even if they completely forget about me in the future, I want them to remember that there was someone from the Philippines who did a cool thing and they did it well so that they can look on to other people and consider hiring them too.
We will never forget you, Pam.
Thank you.
Dominique?
Yeah, like Pam was saying, in a very blunt sense, working on a project this big, it opens doors for your own career, and it feels like, you know, by having this opportunity on this project, I have kind of a ladder up to greater influence in this field and to greater opportunities to help, you know, continue to get my name out there and get eyes on my projects and to build my resume. And what I want to be careful to do is, as I, you know, take that ladder up, to leave the ladder down behind me so other people have access to those same like handholds to keep moving upwards. So what I really want to do is get to a position where I'm able to boost or can translators who might not have opportunities this otherwise. I was saying I want people to know that Black didn't have all that much experience that we could bring in on our. I want to help the next thing going.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think we got the sort of the general gist.
Okay, sorry about that. We are having a bit of a storm here.
That's rough, but yeah, this is obviously an enormous opportunity. I think a friend has always said that if you want to help minorities in this industry, give them money, give them jobs, and put them high profile in those jobs. This did all of that on the biggest stage available for Wizards of the Coast. It'll give me more credibility going forward for further projects. It'll give other Muslim dudes, like other Desis and Muslim dudes in the US who want to do this, some more credibility getting into the industry, and it'll give me more credibility on my own projects because I'm currently working on my own RPG. And yeah, it's hard to understate how big the effect of credits like this are.
Speaking of the effect in all of our future careers, I know we only have about 5 minutes left, so it's hype. It's hype time. All right, so everyone hype yourself. Okay, hype Radiant Citadel and hype yourself. So I want everyone to give one thing that why people should be excited by Radiant Citadel, and then where they can find you and your awesomeness next. Let's go the other way around, so start with Bashir.
Hey, I'm Bashir Gauss. You can find me at twitter.com/Bashir Gauss. I wrote The Tayyib Empire, a pretty great Mughal-inspired fantasy setting in the Beyond the Radiant Citadel section, which you should be incredibly hyped for, because it is a very cool setting that does some neat stuff with the basic structure of a D&D setting in terms of enabling the search for adventure and your relationship with authority in that context. I am currently working on Ahadi, an indie RPG with its own bespoke system I'm aiming to crowdfund near the end of the year about the levers of power, and also on the lower level, fast-paced gunfights.
Yes.
Nice. We want it. Pam?
Hi, I'm Pam Ponsalan. I am the Dovetailer on Twitter. I also am recently a streamer doing Final Fantasy XIV, the critically acclaimed MMORPG. For Journeys of the Radiant Citadel, my adventure is basically Sacred Dragon Heist and Moral Choices, so you better look forward to that. And everybody else has such cool, amazing things. It's like taking a tour through a fantastic world and having literally any chance to do any kind of adventure, because we all have that to offer. On a personal project front, I am doing the Dagger Isle supplement officially for Blades in the Dark, so it's going to be Southeast Asian inspired. And what's cool about that is we turned the Dagger Isles into a archipelago made from the bones and sinew and blood of a dead god. So I hope that's like super cool for you, because I think it's super cool for me. My partner and I also have put our baby, powered by the Apocalypse game, Navathem's End, about agents trying to stop the end of the world multiple times every single day. It's already in layout, so look forward to that. By the end of the month, I think, it will be available on a limited print run. So I'm super excited about that. And that's me.
Yay. Dominique?
I'm Dominique Dickey. You should be Radiant Citadel because my adventure and my setting they're inspired by the Mali Empire, which is an era of African history that is, I think, underhyped and super exciting. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at DomSDickey or at DominiqueDickey.com. My RPG Plant Girl game, which is about a family of plant children working to thwart ecological disaster in their will be crowdfunded on GameFound next month. And the best way to keep up on that is to follow me on Twitter.
Nice. And finally, I'm Erin Roberts. I'm on Twitter at Nirele, which is Nirele, or L Erin backwards. And you should check out God's Breath from Radiant Citadel, because it's Black diaspora outside of Africa in a fantasy setting, which is something I don't think that we really see enough. And I just mostly work in IP work, so just like check me out on Twitter so you can see the stuff I'm doing for Pathfinder and Starfinder and everybody. And buy this. It is amazing. That is what you need to know. I know that we are now heading to like the last sort of like 1 minute. So I was glad that we were able to get that all in. But, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and supporting, and do the thing. Yay.
Yay.
Hey.